Hello, everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Lord of the Land. I'm Joe Maloney, and I'm here to educate you about rental property investing and being a landlord. In the world of real estate investing, one of the most popular and attainable areas of investing is in multifamily real estate. Multifamily real estate is where you have more than one person paying rent. So, what are the types of multifamily real estate? Well, it can be as simple as renting a room. If you own a home and you rent out a room to someone who then pays you rent, then you are some form of a landlord. It can be a house with 4 rooms and you're renting out 4 rooms. And maybe you don't have anywhere to live if you rent out 4 rooms. I don't know. But then it moves up and it changes, and the next kind of level of a building beyond that, beyond a single family home with multiple rooms, is a duplex. And a duplex is simply a building or a plot of land with 2 residences on it. One of the most common entry points for people to enter into multifamily real estate with a duplex is where they live in one half of the duplex and they rent out the other half of the duplex, in the hopes that they're able to rent the duplex for enough money that they can reduce or eliminate their own living costs. The number of units goes up from there. Triplexes are 3 units, fourplexes are obviously 4 units, and then there's a change at 4 units. Above 4 units, there's 5 and above is a different category. The reason that there's 2 categories has to do with lending, and we'll get into that in another video where we talk about how to finance your property, kind of where the point of entry is, what the difference between 4 units and 5 units is. We'll deal with that later, but just realize that 5 units and above is a different category than 2 to 4 units, which really is a different category also than 1 unit. Owning multifamily rental properties have different kind of ownership structures, and what are the ownership structures for multifamily real estate? Basically, there's 3 types. One is a sole proprietorship. That is where you own that rental property, and it's in your name, and that's the most simple structure. It's also the most dangerous. The second type, we'll get into the danger later on another video. The second type would be a DBA, also known as a doing business as. This really provides no more protection than a sole proprietorship. It really just hides your name. Maybe your name. My name is Joe Maloney, and I have a rental property business called the Rental Property Business, and then I have my tenant in my duplex write a check to Rental Property Business, and the bank account names are in Rental Property Business. That's a doing business as. It's an important step, but it's really no different than a sole proprietorship, other than the name. And then the third type of ownership would be corporate ownership. And this is really where I think everybody needs to be. And I'll do a video on different types of corporate ownership. But the main type of corporate ownership, for basic clarity here, is the limited liability corporation, or the LLC. And most apartment buildings are owned in LLCs. And the reason to have an LLC is in the name, limited liability. A limited liability corporation provides legal protection for the owner, both within and without the corporation. The second type of ownership, and second and third type of ownership I'd put together, those are both S and C corporations. Those are far more complicated entities. You end up in taxation issues. Almost no one owns residential multifamily real estate except for very large corporations in a C and or S corporation. I won't talk about those. I don't think that the corporate structure is very relevant to multifamily real estate ownership. So once you have the kind of who owns the building, the question is, well, who lives in the building? And obviously tenants live in the building. And there are three types of tenancies that you can have. The one would be an individual tenancy. That's where an individual lives in the apartment. We'll call it an apartment, and they have a lease with you, and they're the only person on the lease. Shared tenancies are where you have two or more unrelated parties living in the same residence, and typically there are multiple leases or lease agreements for their occupation of the residence. And then the third type would be a family, where you have multiple people who are related living in the residence, and they will typically only have one lease. It's possible that that can be broken into two leases, but that's kind of the exception. We won't really talk about that. So now that we know who's living in the residence, the question is, who's running it? Who's managing it on a day-to-day basis? And there are I've created three categories for who's managing the property. The first one is the simplest one and the most obvious one, and generally the most profitable one, and that is the owner-manager. That's the guy who owns the building, your kind of classic landlord setup, where the owner comes in, fixes the broken disposal on a Saturday afternoon, and everything goes on just fine. A second type of management that you would see would be something that would occur in larger buildings. It would be an on-site manager. An on-site manager lives in the building, typically, has one of the apartments. They're generally paid for or compensated for their work. In California, for example, on-site managers are required in buildings of 14 units or more. So that's an on-site manager. An on-site manager will take care of a lot of times all the showings and the day-to-day operations and management of leases and collecting rent and those types of things. The third type of management would be third-party property management companies. Third-party property management companies take care of the day-to-day operations and management and shield the owner from communication and interaction with the tenants. There are advantages and disadvantages to third-party property managers, but we'll go into that. But really, those are the three types of management. So that's the basics of kind of what a multifamily building is, and who owns the building, who runs the building, who lives in the building, and what type of building it is. Please hit like and subscribe if you want more videos about real estate investing and being a landlord. I look forward to educating more of the population about how to be a good landlord. So thank you very much.